Pramila, do you want to give it 2 or 3 minutes more for people to come in, or would you like me to start?
I think we can start.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm Usha Kela, the co-director along with Pramila of Matwaala. I'm going to start by actually posting both the bios of these two wonderful poets who are going to be in conversation today. So kindly just give me a second while I take care of that formality. Um, Once we have the bios, we can take our time to read both of them. Okay. All right. Do we have both of them there? Yes, wonderful. So thank you all for being here. I'm especially excited this evening because I know Pramila has waited for a long time and this book was very close to her heart. And I was part of the journey. I saw an earlier manuscript. We kept crossing our fingers, waiting for it to come into the world, and here it is. And as you know, the title is Exile is Not a Foreign Word. I skimmed through the book. I read the manuscript quite thoroughly just before it was published, and I looked at it again today. And primarily, I perceive this as a book of witness, and it reflects Pramila's long reign vision and her vast literary, activist, and social engagement arc. And some of the things she touches upon are genocide, geopolitical events, police brutality, caste, physical and mental borders, exploitation, and themes of this kind which are very difficult to tackle. Realism and kind of the nightmarish scenarios unfolding on the planet, and yet she manages to transform and alchemize it to poetry. And she calls upon diverse voices as Sadat Hassan Manto, W.H. Jordan, Hannah Arendt, M.L. King, Mahmoud Darwish, Faiz Ahmad Faiz, her personal family members. And I think the just the gamut of voices she's able to call into her work is reflective of her own scholarship and brilliance to see connections. I found something quite interesting. I was looking at the section heads, and I felt that was a very deliberate hierarchy, suggesting a transmutation and the transmutation possibilities of the central metaphor. And the central metaphor, as we know, are walls. And so the first section is titled as walls, then it goes to frames, and then it goes to rungs. And I think when we think of rungs of a ladder, we are talking of transcendence and moving upward. So I thought it was a very symbolic transformation of those walls to something that can be broken down into something that can unite people in a different way. So I loved the section uh, headers, and I thought there were little clues there as to what she was trying to do with this collection of work. And I think she was kind of indicating the clarion of hope, within the geopolitics of migration. And I also think it's no coincidence that the opening poem is a love poem that reveals her secret anthem. I think the poet in Pramila is asking us to bear our shared realities, and she urges us to look for metamorphosis. As she states in a poem, walls have secret openings, hidden passages, and she's asking us and telling us that we just need to find them and that they can be overcome. So that's my little reading into this wonderful, wonderful book. And I'm thrilled now to hand this over to Marianela and Pramila. And I think we're in for a treat. So I welcome both of you warmly to this platform of Matwaala. I forgot to say anything about Matwaala. You can find everything you need to about it at matwaala.com. We are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and this is one of the 15 events. I think I count when I counted last. We have about 15 events across the country this year, and so glad that Pramila's being part of that very, very special anniversary celebration. So it's over to both of you, and I'll keep I'll zip it now and listen to the real words of wisdom. So, welcome everyone.
Thank you, Usha. And perhaps you want to introduce Marianela?
Ah, yes. So, in the bio here, we see that Marilyn, she just wears so many hats that I'm always at a little bit of loss. And I think she's also something beyond these hats that she wears. And essentially, she has a career in counseling and psychology. She hosts a podcast. She's a brilliant poet, poet that inspires me every time I read her work. She's a meditation teacher, and she's involved with various projects of building libraries and holding creative workshops for young children. And she lives in Connecticut. And I think she's someone who never stops hoping Earth will be better, and each of us has a hand in making it better. So that is Marianella to me. Uh, Pramila, I'm going to request people to read your bio because I don't know actually where to begin and stop with your bio. And this is the barest abbreviation of it. Uh, Exile is not a foreign word, I think, is your 10th book. And in between, you're an activist on so many platforms. I have to keep writing them down to remember them. But I think Walls is a wonderful, somehow it's, I think, a synthesis of the many things that you are doing in your life kind of come together in this book because you tackle so many important issues. So I'll hand that over to both of you now.
Thank you so much, Usha, for that brilliant opening and introduction of my book, um, and some of your observations about the structure of the book. I want to open by first thanking my publisher, Sarabjit Garcha of Copper Coin, New Delhi. He couldn't be here because it's early in the morning in India. It's probably 4:30. So he sends his apologies. And I want to thank Usha for being in conversation with me about so many of these poems when they were still in manuscript form. And I think that is so important because I feel that much of the poetry that we write is actually part of a whole conversation among poets. Poets that we read, as well as the poets that we are in touch with in our daily lives. And I think it's important to see all poems as conversations. So I don't feel that this is a solitary work. I feel it's part of a larger conversation with my Matwaala poets as well as other poets that I encounter in my daily life. I would also like to thank Marianela, who's taken time out of her very hectic schedule to be here and to be in conversation with me. I feel very honored, and I admire her work that she does, and also her role as an activist in her community. So it's really a pleasure to see you here and to be, looking forward to this conversation. And I thank my Matwala family, many of whom are here, and some of whom couldn't be here, and they will be, of course, listening to the recording later. It's been quite a journey the last 10 years, and it's been a pleasure to be working with the other Matwala poets all these years and just be in conversation about poetry. I mean, what's better thing to do than do that? And of course, I thank my audience here, for again taking the time on a Friday evening when you'd rather be, going to a restaurant with a best friend or your husband or whoever. So thanks for making the time to be here. I'd like to start by reading just a few poems, share like 3 or 4 poems before I get into conversation with Marianella. So the one of the opening poems is called Walls, a Poetics. And I'd like to start by reading this because I feel that it sort of gives us the idea of the kind of poetics that I'm using, throughout the work, the impetus for the entire work. And it's written in many sections, so I'll read the first section and the penultimate section. Walls, a Poetics. Hannah Arendt wonders about thoughtlessness, our pushing thought aside like a stone caught in the mouth while chewing dinner, how we willfully look away or at atrocities. Driving on Pond Path on an early February morning, my worries turn to dust when I see the sun, a fat gold semicircle, rising between the trees. By day, the sun's wand exposes the bones of the city, awakening foul air, the hues of dawn distant. I'm unnerved by the thought that I can be violent towards the ones I do not recognize, who are different. I send my thoughts out like birds to the borders, willing joy to people remaining unknown, reduced to numbers. How brave am I to think of others before myself? Illuminate my world with thoughts that can dismantle walls. And the penultimate section of this poem, it's too late, they say, about the bank of the river disappearing. After the hurricane, we stand on the porch. Waves crash below. The beach is gone. Our house seems to hang by a thread. When a city vanishes, the rescued are on new land, readying to build again. You lose hope one day, gain it the next. Hands join and structures grow. We are experts at repair. We can't fix the family, but we are good at steadying a wobbly table, cleaning a polluted lake. We also know to quit saying, too late, the mantra of hopelessness. Our minds, seldom fixed, are rocked by brain waves, bringing us closer to shore. So that's the poetic argument for the book. And I'll go on to read my title poem. I was intrigued about, because I've been preoccupied with the concept of exile for, I think, most of my writing life. And so I wanted to talk about the word exile, how it's not really foreign to us. It's like right here. Exile is not a foreign word. To understand exile, you don't have to look further than the family down the street who lost their home and all they owned, including their pets, in a fire or a foreclosure, or the mass of people reaching their arms out to rescuers who pull them out of the water in the sudden hurricane that sweeps the coast where you live, or the birds that drop dead at your feet and you smell the smoke of wildfire blazing through a forest up north. You don't have to look far to understand exile and homelessness. True, you still have a state you claim as yours, but the sensation of being in a vacuum, a dead zone, arises when your name etched on an identity card or online records cannot verify your existence. Yes, that too is a reality of anyone who swears by a country, not to mention if your palms are charred and your face alters with hurt. Thank you for that. Um, so, like I said, I think we are all in conversation with other poets. And one of the poets that I've admired for many, many years is Mohammad Darwish. And so I've been thinking a lot about Mohammad Darwish. He is a Palestinian poet. He was a Palestinian poet, and he lived in exile in Paris. And so this poem kind of came to me. I was sort of imagining him in Paris, and then, you know, looking at what is happening to his homeland. Letter to Mohammed Darwish. You had nightmares that the street you grew up in forgot you, that the doors of the familiar vanished. You wrote to melt the walls, but saw them harden as you stirred your tea, breathing the Paris air, memorizing last night's images. But if you're here, you'd fall on your knees in the dust and weep to see the children of Gaza, your kin, buried in the fiery wreckage of Israel's rage. How can the ones who've seen death's emissaries become those emissaries? Heart fogged, how do they pour, pour flames to burn my land? You don't have to ask these. Your lament still echoes through all your poems, memorized by us, keeping every brick of Palestine alive. When you open your window, you who only saw your garden, irises and olives scenting the air, now watch survivors wander, dazed, and you have no words. You don't turn away from the horror. I know you will stay where it's unbearable. So I turn to you in the soul crushing moment and read your words, rescuing home. So I'll maybe read one other short poem, and I was thinking of the flag. I mean, this poem went through many iterations, and finally, this is what I have. It used to be called Flag, and then now I've named it Innocence in the book. Innocence. A child bends down to pick up what you lost, smooths down the fabric, star after star, dust on her fingers, and skips up to her mother's call in the dusk, the cosmos in her pocket. So, so that gives you a kind of a range of where I'm going with this book. So,
Thank you so much, Pramila, for that reading. And I think it was the right way to start this conversation. And I want to thank both of you for allowing me. There were so many others who could have been doing this interview. And it's a true honor to be the one. And when I received the book, I was actually in the Dominican Republic, and I was playing with the language and translating it, and especially the poem that gave title to the book, and the latest one, the Innocence one. They really translated so well into Spanish, and now you have a full audience in the Dominican Republic
oh my
waiting.
goodness.
But I've been part of Matwaala since the beginning, so I feel that this has been home for me. I guess there is a little Asian Indian in me that feels very happy to have been part of this. And as Usha was saying, the themes in your book, Pramila, are so difficult to metabolize, but you found ways to make them accessible to us and to allow us to, I think you and I were talking about this earlier today, allow us to see the darkness from where we can extract the wisdom necessary for us to get out of these trying times that we are living. That are times, as Roshi John Halifax says that we are made for these times. And I think your book really brings that to life. The way that you use, that you depict so many events, people, and places that made it into the book. What I will say is that the book itself is a well-conceived ghazal, which is, you play with that in very well also with the form in one of your poems. But I think the whole book is that, is the dancing, the poetic expression of pain, loss, separation from the beloved, and the beloved place, the beloved, right? You play so well in the beauty of love despite the pain. So yes, it's the theme thematically is a very difficult book, but by the action of love and your intuition and your visionary, your poetic vision, you made it so digestible, so easy to metabolize. In your invocation of Hannah Arendt, you remind us how when we don't learn from the past, we are condemned to repeat it, unless we believe in collective responsibility. And my question is, how do we at this time, when in all spheres of the globe, we seem to be regressing, how do we bounce back into inner and outer resourcing?
I mean, that's a great question, Marianela. And I think poetry is something that allows us to do that.
mm,
So think about just this past few weeks when we've all been going through the severity of having to deal with, very difficult, indigestible news
mm,
almost on a daily basis, not just a few weeks. I mean, I would say for the past 1.5 years, or maybe even earlier. But one of the things that we as writers and particularly poets are able to do is to just get into the zone of writing. I
mm,
think using language is such a privilege, to be able to actually just stay with language, because I think language offers us this ability to have some kind of a distance from the experience that we're writing about,
yeah.
and it allows us to play, and that's where the joy comes.
Mhm,
So we may be writing about extremely difficult, traumatic events, whether it are in our own personal lives or something that we are witnessing
mhm,
outside. But I think poetry offers us that ability to stay within language.
yeah.
And I think when we stay within language, we are able to somehow bounce. When you say bounce back, that is the bouncing back, because you're sort of in the zone.
Yeah.
And when you're writing a poem, you're actually lifted out of yourself, at least for those few minutes or seconds. And I think that is so important, where you've forgotten yourself because you're in the experience of the act of writing.
Mhm,
And I think for the reader, also the bouncing back happens in reading the poem. And there is a transformation that happens upon reading the poem. And in that transformation, that's where one is able to live again.
yeah.
And of course, as Hannah Arendt, the wonderful Jewish American philosopher, points out, is that we repeat our mistakes.
Mhm,
We don't really learn from history. History rhymes.
mhm, Yeah.
And we don't necessarily, the oppressor doesn't really remain, I mean, the oppressed can also become the oppressor.
Yeah.
That is our human failing. And so she points that out in her book, The Trial of Eichmann. And it's a very again, it's a very difficult concept for many of us who've been victims of history to
Mm.
actually imbibe and say, oh yeah, I too can be the oppressor. And so I think much of Wall's poetics is the witnessing of the walls being built, but also the consciousness that we also have our walls within ourselves that we have
Yeah.
created, right? So it's a critical look at oneself as well as the outside world.
And that's what brings the transformation that allows the bouncing back, no doubt. And in the poem, well, the whole book, but exile is not a foreign word, one can see your ability to explore these complex themes, such as those related to love and the human condition, but also something going back to what you just said, the interconnection and the myth of separation. That is the force actually that is most divisive these days. So you delve into the depth sorrow and through the liberating power of words, while still holding a sense of grace and beauty. And that's one of the things that has captivated the most me during the reading of your poems. But example is this poem that gives title. And in my view, the myth of separation and our ultimate together are the bounds, the medicine that we need to really say that we were born for these times. Do you consider this poem to be an example of what we can call engaged spirituality? The spirituality that is intended to create not only inner transformation, but outer transformation.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you asked that because at one point when I was looking at my manuscript, I was thinking, oh my God, these are such dark poems.
Mhm.
But then it took me a while to go back to them, and you know how it is, you have to take time and then you go back and look at the poems.
Yeah.
And I felt that even though it's say an individual poem is talking about something terrible that has happened, there are certain things that hold up, the language holds up the light to something.
Mhm.
And I think it is the light that comes with certain images of the metaphors. I think that really creates a connection.
Mm.
And also, it's the connecting with the reader, right? Like, for example, you're able to observe certain things. Usha was able to observe certain things. So, in that observation, you again form connection.
Yeah.
And I think that connection is that spiritual experience. Because obviously, Hannah Arendt, as a philosopher, she's talking about that coming together, how, because in this terrible separation, how do you find connection? And for her, as well as with other philosophers, whether it's East or West, it is that seeing the other person as oneself. Like, for example, like what Levinas says, seeing the face of the other. So I think, in a way, writing creates that kind of that empathy. So when we think about empathy, usually just in a very normal everyday sense, we think about, oh, I feel for this other person. But in writing, what happens is, I think it goes even deeper than that, where you're totally entering into the experience of the other. and then taking that other into yourself. It is even more than what T.S. Eliot is talking about, negative capability, of, I mean, Keats's negative capability, and what T.S. Eliot is also talking about, where, you are entering the consciousness of the other, and then, being able to experience what they have experienced somewhat, but at least you're making the effort of doing that. And I think that's what creates the empathy. And of course, I'm not saying all of us are successful at that. We may not be, but it's an attempt. And I think that attempt is important because that's where spirituality lies. Because then you're forgetting yourself because you're in the other person.
Which then is the reflection back. I mean, it's the interest net, right? That is that constant reflecting
Yeah,
of one
yeah.
another. Yeah, yeah.
It's like, for example, I'm talking about human beings, right? But it
Mm,
doesn't have to be human beings. It can be the tree in your yard,
yeah,
and
yeah,
totally feeling with the tree in your yard.
right.
And you are into the feeling of the maple tree, and and you wonder, why has this maple has this particular fungus growing on it,
Mm-hmm,
and you want to
mm-hmm,
explore more. You don't want that
mm-hmm.
maple to die.
Yeah.
Or the plant in your living room. I mean, I've written a lot
Mm-hmm.
about the plants in my living room. I even used to sing to my geraniums, hoping that they would grow really healthy. But it's like, feeling with the plants, feeling with the other creatures around you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think it is that extent to which we can use the emotion to delve into that which surrounds us.
Yeah.
And I think that is the spiritual work.
Absolutely. And it's that seeing that we are part of a pluriverse where everything is interconnected. And,
Yeah.
going back to the light that you mentioned, Joyce Carol Oates describes a luminous memory. She talks about a memory that enters a certain place and illuminates it. We need the dark. Without the darkness, we are lost, but there has to be a point of entry for the light. I think of the different ways in which your memories from childhood to adulthood entering and kind of bringing light over themes that most of us prefer to ignore, like poverty, suicide, social injustice, the memories of your mother about the partition, that poem. What luminosity do you discover? What light as you reread your own poems?
Like today, I was rereading my memory of the Indo-Pak War in
Mhm,
1965 when there was this mandatory blackout.
mhm.
And that memory is still so fresh in my mind. And that's where the poem came about. Maybe I should share that
Yes,
and talk
please.
about where that light happens. In fact, when I
Yes.
opened the book, that's where it opened.
See?
And so this is located in Bombay. Then it was known as Bombay. Now it's known as Mumbai. And this was Bombay, right in the middle of Bombay, in a place called Science Circle. And we lived in a tiny little apartment above the circle. It was my mom and dad and my two siblings and me. My sister was not yet born. And I was only like 4 years old or 5 years old.
Mm,
And yeah. So this is called Mandated Blackout. Indo-Pak War, 1965. Batti band karo, lights off. A call from the Gurkha police on patrol cuts the night, traveling up 3 balconies to the thin flame Amma has lit to check on the baby. How can Jet see this pinprick light, she mutters, snuffing it out. Baba tut-tuts. I open my eyes, smell lamp smoke, powder and diapers. No shadows. My parents are two blobs. My brothers, smaller blobs, snuggling close to Amma. The barred windows are silvered by a moonless dark. I'm afraid to look out. I know a sign circle below, a black well, two roads branching from it, spreading a nightmare. Trees within its fence changing into giants. I make faces at my brothers, open my mouth like into a big O, grimace like a witch, make horns, stick my tongue out. No adult threats to stop it. Want a beating? I pull apart my oiled braids so my hair spikes like porcupine quills, stick my pinky up my nose, and eat a booger. And still no shout from Amma, no yanking of my elbow to the sink, her rings cutting my palms as she plunges them under a tap. We sleep in dark, curled on the floor, and wake up to a brilliant day as if the war were elsewhere.
Mm, mm, yes.
So, in that poem, to answer your question, I think the light enters in the because the child is not aware of the war. The child is only looking at all the things that she can do in the dark, without having getting any being punished by the parents,
Yeah.
right? And it's the most silly things that she is not supposed to do, like putting a pinky up her nose. So, so I think it's about children and how they are in war situations. Like here it was just a blackout, but even the blackout is problematic for the mother because the mother has to take care of the baby.
Yeah.
So I think the light happens also in myself imagining the scene after so many years. It's not exactly, I'm sure, as it was because it's a recollection. So in the recollection, a lot of things change, and the imagination sort of comes in to put in the kind of details that, again, I imagine what the room must have looked like, the silvered, window and such images, and and the forgetting of of that memory, because the next day it's a brilliant day.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is
Mm-hmm.
already forgotten.
Yeah.
We're already on to the next thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So it is that constant change, and in a way,
Yeah.
the light is also about trying to remember and then keep a particular moment alive
Yeah.
because one doesn't want that moment to be erased.
Mm-hmm. This is bringing me to Isabel Allende, the writer from Chile. She invites us to write what should not be forgotten. She said to when we put it in writing, then things have a permanency. In that sense, though, and thinking about what you are saying, do you think a writer chooses what to write about, or the writing and the events choose us? When you think
Yeah.
about that particular poem, those particular instances that you um, handpicked to make these poems.
Yeah, I think the only thing I may have chosen to write about is basically the Bati Band Karo, because I do remember the police,
Mhm,
patrolling that area and then calling out and hearing the voice. I remember that. And so and then the darkness and all of us huddled together.
mhm,
So those images I do remember. But then that's where a lot of the imagination comes in, and then you recreate the scene.
yeah.
So, yeah, some of it I think we choose,
Mhm,
and there's a lot we do not choose. It just comes in the writing. It
mhm,
happens at particular moment. Like if I wrote this poem right now,
mhm,
putting this book aside, it would be probably a different poem.
mhm,
It may not be the same poem. It's like, for example, you lose your poems on your hard drive
mhm.
and you have to sit and recreate all those poems. You can't. You're going to be writing a different set of poems.
Yeah.
It's like what Maxine Hong Kingston said when she lost her manuscript in a fire. She had to rewrite the whole thing.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't even imagine that moment when the whole thing is lost and then you have to recreate it. And I'm sure it was a different book
Yeah.
from what she had written earlier. So it's the same thing, I think. And also I feel that most of my poems over the last 35 35 years, I think I've been probably writing about the same thing,
Mhm. Mhm.
about growing up, and resisting, because here it's
Yeah.
also about resistance,
Yeah.
right? Doing things that your parents don't want you to do.
Yeah.
So, disobeying, the ways we resist. So, in a way, poetry itself, I think, is a way of resisting
Yeah.
because you don't want to conform. And writing is a way of resisting
Yeah. And
because
I
you
know.
write about all the subjects that, you can be held up for, like right now, especially the times we are living in.
Mhm.
Much of what we write would be called, uh, you know, not
Subversive.
really acceptable.
Mhm. Mhm. And in that sense, with this global or geopolitical chaos, and the chaos in places like your India, Israel, and Gaza, Haiti, where governments are not trustworthy. Um, there is a tinge of premonition, I think, that whatever we do can be taken away, destroyed, including the poems. And I don't know about you, but there is doubt, right? It's like, what's the use of poetry? Of course, I know what the use is, but the question comes. So let's say that we are living in a world where we don't know the rules because they change all the time, and especially if we think in this country right now, um, and often it's not just that they change, but they have a retroactive effect, impact on us. So the world is changing, is unreliable. And my question is kind of on the same lines of my question about spirituality before. How do we recover a sense of faith, of trust in a turbulent time? Going back to the theme that, yeah, we were born for these times. How, and that the reason I'm asking you this question is because I think you answered that through the book, but I don't want to speak for you.
So your question is, how do we develop trust?
And recover a sense of faith
Faith, yeah.
when
And
things are constantly changing
changing, yeah.
and coming back to hurt us with the change.
Yeah. And there's always the thing of being re-traumatized,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the fears is very legitimate, and
Mm-hmm.
feeling of danger is also very real.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the trust happens again only in the moments when we are writing.
Mm-hmm.
Though, of course, sometimes we may not have the privilege of even writing, because again, it is a great leisure to be able to find a moment to actually sit and write. So I
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can find the moment to actually be able to put into words whatever is happening at that particular moment
Mm-hmm.
and write it, I think that itself is a great liberation. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to read a quote from, what's her name? I think Jane Hirschfield. And this is what she says. She says, right speech is the core of a right life.
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism teaches that the quality of one's speech is a part of liberation's path. The Bill of Rights lists speaking freely as fundamental to democracy's health. And I think it is so true. When we think of liberation, it is that right speech. And when I say right, I don't, okay, right. I think what she says is much better. The quality of one's speech. So
Mhm,
in poetry, we are always trying to improve the quality of what one is saying. So we are, using language to be able to say to the best of our ability,
mhm,
to talk about that particular moment that you want to express. And I think that, and trusting in the language, trusting in one's ability to actually speak, I think that is so important. And that is where I think faith resides.
mhm,
There is an anecdote that Carolyn Forche begins her book, Poetry of Witness.
mhm,
It's
mhm.
called Against Forgetting. That's the
Against
book,
forgetting.
Against
Yeah.
Forgetting. And she opens with this particular anecdote. And the anecdote goes, there's this writer, his name is Miklos Radnoti, a
Mhm,
Hungarian poet.
mhm,
And he is captured along with many other people in Hungary, and they're taken to the death camps.
mhm,
But the thing is, the war ends. So when the war ends, many of them are being brought back to Hungary. So he's part, and he thinks, oh, let me be part of the first group of people because they're given a choice. Do you want to be the first group? And he thinks that's the safest, and
mhm.
he's part of the first group. But they're all shot dead because the soldiers cannot find enough hospital spaces for them. So,
Yeah.
but the thing is, while he was held prisoner, he had a tiny little notebook, and he had written poems in that notebook. And so, when his wife, after the war, had the body exhumed, the
Mhm,
coroner found the notebook, and it was cleaned and then dried, and then those poems were published.
mhm,
I'm just giving the anecdote because I feel that in that extremity of that kind of darkness and fear,
mhm.
he had the presence of mind to actually say, I'm going to write.
Yeah.
That was the ultimate trust and faith he had, that he
Mhm.
would actually put into words
Yeah.
whatever he was seeing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the wife to have found them. And I
Mhm.
felt, oh my God, this is the ultimate expression of love, of not just the wife finding it, but for all of us in all these generations who are able to read those poems.
Yeah.
So I think when we speak and we write, we cannot take that lightly because I think it reaches a vast number of people. And I think we have to trust in that
Yeah.
because that is the ultimate for our liberation as well as for what we call democracy.
Yeah. Beautifully said. So I think we are at the end. I just want to thank you again. And I think another thing that I didn't say at the beginning, but I think this book is about transcendence, which is what you are saying through your beautiful response about faith. It's about our ability to move beyond this physical world to a transcendental understanding of feelings, emotions, and while retaining a food on this world to the mundane, the spiritual and the mundane are always in a dance. And I think your book was able to really portray that. So thank you so much for giving us the gift of your presence and for allowing me to enter in conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Marianela. I mean, it's been a real pleasure to talking to you, and exchanging, your view of the book as well as my own. I'm thinking even more, because of your questions. So thank you so much for that opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Pramila and Marianella. I'm really sad that this has to come to an end because I think we were just warming up, and it was such a pleasure to actually witness these two minds in conversation, um, uh, a conversation between poetics and geopolitics, academia, poetry, spirituality, and psychology. And Marianella, I am going to be, I think, thinking of this line that you've said for quite a few nights, trying to decipher the profound mystery to it, that you said we were born for these times.
Mhm.
And you also made a statement about the myth of separation.
Mhm.
That was another statement. And I think I'll be thinking about those two things for a very long time. And your questions, I think, were just so deeply grounded. You asked her, how do we recover faith and rediscover trust? And I
Mhm.
think that's what these poems are really trying to answer.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I want to join Pramila with her own words actually to answer that question. That comes from the last poem, her last poem, where she says, they know the measure of flight, how to allow being buffeted, unresisting, when to wait for calm. And I felt these lines were actually a tribute to the human spirit, not just to the poet or not just to uh, certain people going through certain experiences, but the human being as we are constructed, our willingness to be buffeted, our willingness to be resurrected, I think was a great way to end that book. So, congratulations again, Pramila. It was just a marvelous experience being here today. But I think we probably do have time for people to interact with you with a few questions. It's a intimate gathering, so I think we should allow a few questions from any of the poets who are present today, because I have a feeling people are itching to say a bit also. So thank you both very much, and I think we can open up the mic to a few more people. If there's anyone who wants to talk to either Marianela or Pramila, or you have a question or you have something you'd like to address, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think Ibtisam.
Ibtisam, please.
Can you unmute?
Pramila.
Yes,
Do I need to do that or
I
can?
no, I did.
Okay,
Well,
very
that was one of the most beautiful conversations I've ever heard in such a short time, and succinct and so deep and comprehensive and light at the same time. It's extremely beautiful. I just wanted to thank you on behalf of Mahmoud Darwish, because you brought him up, and I'm Palestinian, and I met him and wrote about him, and for you to bring him up at this time. His soul is right here. And I just wanted to express my gratitude from him and from all the Palestinian people and everyone who cares about humanity, to you, that you actually embraced us in your poetry like this. It makes a giant difference for me as a Palestinian. Every time I hear an expression of caring, especially at this time, it's like medicine. So I want to thank you.
Thank you, Ibtisam.
Thank you, Ibtisam. For those of you who are not able to attend, we had a panel of Palestinian poets a few weeks ago. And Ibtisam was one of the poets who graced and really helped us formulate that whole panel. And she's written a brilliant memoir. And I was wondering, Ibtisam, could you say a few words about your memoir and put it in the chat? Um,
Well, here's a Mickey Mouse behind me is reading Tasting the Sky. I always have Mickey Mouse reading it. So this is the book, Tasting the Sky, a Palestinian childhood. It's about me growing up in Palestine. So I'm going to write it.
okay. Tasting the Sky.
Yes, a Palestinian childhood. And it's for our Strauss and Giroux publisher. It's, see, right now, like 15 to 16,000 Palestinian children have been killed. And maybe 20,000 are orphaned. Even more than that have lost all of their families. and even more have lost part of their bodies, like limbs, eyes, etc. So what's happening really is basically is an attack on childhood and on motherhood. Mothers who are pregnant don't have enough food or medicine, and they give birth on the streets. Many of them die in the process of giving birth. So this is like what's happening is so inhumane, especially because it targets children. They don't have language, as Pramila was speaking. When we have language, the luxury of language, which means distance, and children don't have vocabulary for what's going on, for the fear that they fear as they die. They can't even say a word that can last and that we can hear from their understanding. And that denial of that level of life, that they live enough to grasp language, they live enough to learn the alphabet, to learn to write their names, is not offered to them. It's extremely sad. Like during the Holocaust, 4% of those people who perished were children, just 4%. Like right now in Palestine, it's more than 30%. It's huge because that means our future. So Tasting the Sky of Palestinian Childhood is about my childhood in war. And I feel so grateful that I survived and to use all my life to speak for children, about children, inviting children, childhood, not just children who are young people, but the prisoner children inside of us, that all of us who suffered and were not allowed to heal during our childhoods. We carry those wounded children in us. And so to speak about that too and create a safety for all children, the young, the old, the in-betweens, the scared ones, the hiding ones, the ones who left early, the ones who are old, but they're still also imprisoned in those childhoods. To speak about that, that has been the gift I have been given, which is to care deeply about children and childhood. And Tasting the Sky is one of these books that will take you to Palestine and to Palestinian childhood. It's loved by so many people because I wrote it with my soul, and that's all I can say. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Tisam. If any of you are interested in that panel, we have a recording of it and I'll be happy to send it across. We're coming to
Varsha,
the end.
I think Nina and then Varsha.
Okay, yeah.
I was just going to say, that was so powerful, what you just spoke about. It reminds me of what you said in the very beginning about history and how we don't learn from history. This is what happens, and that we pay the price over and over again. And I think about the fact that the aggressors in this war are the people that suffered so much in the 30s and 40s. And you would think that with that in their minds, in their souls, that they would have some compassion. And yet there's no compassion, it seems. And I don't know if that's just the political surface of the people that, are in power, or the Israelis themselves are feeling that. Because I know what's happening in America is very similar. People are becoming numb to their feelings about what's happening. They're just not processing enough what's going on. It's just too overwhelming. So I just wanted to say that. And I just love your words. They've always loved your words. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nina.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina. Nanette?
I think Varsha wanted to say something.
Yes, Varsha?
Varsha, you to unmute.
Yeah, first off, congratulations for such a powerful book. I really thought of when I got the book, I just look at the contents and I said, from walls and frames and rungs grows this huge metaphor of exile, and the way you have covered not just the current, it's just a little part of the book, but the whole history of humankind, including going as far back as India's post-independence massacre, and bring in Palestine and the death camps, and there's and it feels like anyone who reads this book can understand that we all are different, but we are all in one in this whole structure that you have built. This words, they come from your heart, the spirit, the way you say that you really took the opportunity, the chance, or what was presented to you at the time when things occurred. And then we, of course, we have poets, so we have our own gift to imagine, reimagine, and all that. So in that, I see, poem after poem, and I was really taken by some of the code that you used, that you had talked to me about in your, like the Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and then it goes on and on. It's just fascinating. So thank you, Pramila. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Varsha.
I really appreciate it. I'm glad I could attend. Thank you, Usha, for, again, as always, doing a stellar job of both of you guys. And I want to thank Ibtisam also from the depth of my heart. And I will get the book, and I have another friend who's interested in it too. So I may order two of them. So thank you. And of course, Marianela, that was just incredible. Thank you. I won't take more time. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything to share, or would you like to ask, or anything?
Hi, I just
Anila.
I just always blown away by all of you. So absolutely wonderful. I have a guest in the house. I wasn't sure that I can attend, but I'm so glad I managed to do that. And the question, I don't have any questions. It's so moving and powerful as always. But see, this thing that we are discussing about repeating history, and you mentioned memory, like we are telling another story always. And I was wondering, what is this relationship with this memory and forgetting and repeating over and over again?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a large philosophical question.
Yes.
Sorry, sorry about that, but it is this memory
But
thing
that's
that,
essentially what it is, and then you have to remember. So Toni Morrison actually talks about this, and she says that what we are doing as writers is re-remembering. So she calls it re-memory. And I think it's important to do the re-memory because that's the way you memorialize things that will otherwise be erased,
yeah,
right?
right,
So in a lot of ways, we do remember
yes, yes, yes,
because
yes,
sometimes it's all in fragments, it's dismembered. So then you
yeah.
try to remember.
And it seems when victims, I mean, victims never become liberated beings. Identification with victimhood seems to, because the memory then is that of victimhood. And then there is this repetition of oppression. It's the same people. This is such
Yeah,
a
yeah. But the
talk
thing is, in
about,
the remembering,
yeah,
that's where, it is a balance because then one has to allow for the light to happen.
right,
If one doesn't, then one is going to keep going back and just staying with that original trauma.
right, right. That's why the spiraling,
Hmm.
renewal, a new
Yeah, yeah.
recognition, in spite
I
of the
mean, in our own
darkness.
lives, like, right, if you're re-remembering a trauma that happened earlier,
Yeah,
and then you write about it, but then you're trying your best to use language to
Right.
have that distance and you're working with the language, that affords you some distance.
yes.
So you're not
And
just, completely getting into the traumatized state where you just want to lie in bed and pull the covers over your head.
Mm.
You want to overcome that to get into another place. So
right,
one is constantly writing about it to be able to get to that other place. But it has to be a conscious thing, right? Because
yes,
one wants, if you want to consciously transform, then you're using whatever means available to you. And of course, here we are writers, so we
yeah,
are using poetry as a way to allow for that transformation to happen. It's a long
Right.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, because the trauma has to be released. Otherwise, it will keep festering,
Yeah, as we
and
are seeing everywhere today,
that's,
especially,
yeah.
yeah.
But I'm also
Thank you.
thinking that in the re-remembering and the reauthoring is the possibility, because not everyone, as Pramila was saying, not everyone who undergoes trauma goes into PTSD or a traumatic rest of the life. There is one thing that we are paying a lot of attention these days is post-trauma growth. And that's where my faith is actually, as we undergo the phenomenons, the political phenomenons that we are going through right now. So it is in the re-remembering and the reauthoring that the possibility lies. And that's what Pramila did. And with her
Yeah,
beautiful
with all
book.
of us being in conversation about poetry and then writing,
Yeah.
So, I mean, we look forward every time to the blank page and to put words in it and see what kind of magic we can create. Yeah.
Pramila, that was lovely. I enjoyed it very much. Also, your very simple words like memory bringing light. I forget exactly what you said, into the darkness. That's so true. I think we all do it over and over again, and it was lovely. As you were talking, just reminded me of like Randall Jarrell had a poem about the dailiness of life, where he pumps water up from a well and throws it on your face and just wakes you up. So I felt you were pumping out a lot of water, and I was, a very refreshing feeling.
Well, thank you,
So
Srinivas. That's such a lovely image.
Beautiful image. So I think, unfortunately, we have to wrap up the evening, but I think we're all taking back so much of wisdom shared this evening from such fine minds, such beautiful work, such empathy. I think more than anything, Zoom has been criticized as this sometimes as an online and cold land, but I think the warmth was very, very palpable, and I think poetry has a way of doing that. And it was a very warm evening, and I thank everyone. Was, I think, 100% present, and I know mindfulness is a word that Marianela likes a lot, and I think we were all here very mindfully, very happily, very joyfully, and I request all of you to just look at the Matwaala site. We have about 14 or 15 events happening this year. It's a phenomenal amount of things happening to celebrate our 10th anniversary, and it speaks for the poets, it speaks for Matwaala, that so many people have volunteered events to do and to host and to bring such wonderful voices forward. uh, and all I can say is, viva la poetry, and hopefully we'll meet soon again on this platform. And thank you for being here. Thank you, Pramila, Marianela, Nina, Neela, Srinivas, Kavita, everyone. Maggie, I'm probably Varsha, probably forgetting a few names, but thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay,
you. Thank you.
Thanks
Wonderful.
all.
thank you. Good night.
good
Good
night.
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank
Pramila.
you